I've been waking up to literally any sound thinking it's a drone or a jet that is gonna bomb the house. I've been always in a state of constant anxiousness, and that is preventing me from doing everyday activities like working. Also, they've been bombing a lot, not just in the southern suburb of Beirut, but also in Beirut proper, so larger Beirut. And these are areas which we considered safe. And now there's a common collective position or feeling among all Lebanese people that nowhere is safe anymore. And that alone is the most evil of evil things, to be honest.
As the public braced for year two of a brutal war in Gaza, a new war began in Lebanon, with large-scale bombardments of Beirut and villages across southern Lebanon. Israel's tactics have instilled fear in the Lebanese population, which many experts characterize as psychological warfare. That is, they say, because bombing apartment buildings and civilian areas is often not intended to destroy military targets, but to change the opinions, emotions, and morale of the civilian population. Local 514 interviewed Jad Dilati, who is based in Lebanon. Dilati co-wrote an article on how civilians are experiencing psychological warfare as conflict escalates between Israel and Hezbollah.
15-minute evacuation warnings are now posted on social media. Everyone has social media. Thousands of calls and messages done by Israel for people in Lebanon, including the Minister of Information. And these calls threaten people and tell them to evacuate their house because they're close to Hezbollah missiles, and they will be targeted because they're close to them. After Iran attacked Israel, and we heard Netanyahu say that Israel's arm can extend to any point in the Middle East. There's a huge psychological aspect in that, in which these speeches aim to show their superiority. They also aim to inflict the sense of fear and insecurity in us, in the people of our region. It's one full, complete psychological operation where Israel is utilizing every single textbook psychological tactic to inflict the biggest amount of psychological harm and insecurity and fear into the people of Lebanon. And we've seen them do that in Gaza as well.
Local 514 reached out to the Israeli Defense Forces North American media desk, but we did not receive a response before the deadline of this report. Israel's violence in Lebanon escalated in mid-September when Israel weaponized pagers, resulting in explosions across Lebanon. The attacks were said to have targeted Hezbollah, killing the sons of two Hezbollah members of parliament and the daughter of a Hezbollah member. 32 civilians were killed and thousands were injured in these attacks.
It's not legal to just target like any Hezbollah member, right? Hezbollah is has a military wing, but it's also a political party and carries out, a whole host of governance and regulatory functions that don't have anything to do with military offensives. So it's not enough for Israel to respond by saying, well, we knew that these devices were ordered by Hezbollah and were going to be, handed over to Hezbollah members. We need to ensure that those members are actually legitimate targets.
These attacks have instilled fear among the population, fueling concerns around the use of everyday technology. But the effects of psychological warfare go much further than this.
The images of direct bombing, if you are adjacent to that and you're also seeing evacuation notices, how do you avoid the thought, well, like, my neighborhood might be next, right? It's not happening now, but it could happen tomorrow, could happen in the night, like in the middle, like while I'm trying to sleep. It could happen a week from now. There's this great uncertainty, and it's psychologically very taxing. There's this immediate effect of the fear of this is happening to us right now. There's also the chronic sense of uncertainty. This might happen, this could happen.
The impacts of psychological warfare aren't only prevalent in Lebanon, but have extended to the diaspora.
I've seen people crying in the metro because every time they call their parents and they don't answer the phone, they think that some devices exploded or an airstrike happened where their parents are. Like anything could happen at any time.
while 63,000 Israelis have been displaced from the north of Israel in Hezbollah's attacks. 500,000 Lebanese have been displaced in the south of Lebanon. In one day alone, more than 550 Lebanese people were killed in an Israeli airstrike. Amnesty International called this the deadliest day in Lebanon since the end of the country's civil war in 1990. Hitting civilian infrastructure has been a tactic Israel's military has used in Lebanon long before its recent bombardment of southern Lebanon and Beirut.
This is usually hand in hand with the Dahi doctrine, which refers to a military tactic that was first used in 2006 during the war on Lebanon, where they bombed Beirut, which is, the capital of Lebanon. And essentially the message that this sends is if any project of resistance actually resists our project of domination, we will attack and we will target your civilian infrastructure as a deterrent strategy. And so this is another one of the psychological tactics that is used by the occupation to try and stop any project or confrontation with their project of domination.
The Dahiye doctrine is an Israeli military doctrine that uses massive, disproportionate force and the deliberate targeting of civilians and civilian infrastructure, according to the Institute for Middle East Understanding. Israel's violence in Lebanon extends far beyond 2006. Hezbollah was founded in response to Israel's invasion of Lebanon in June of 1982, when Israel intended to push out the Palestinian Liberation Organization. The PLO established its base in Beirut after being pushed out of Jordan in the 1970s and was launching attacks from southern Lebanon to Israel. After the PLO left Beirut in September of 1982, Israel continued violence in Beirut through backing a right-wing Christian Lebanese militia called the Phalange to carry out mass killings in refugee camps. This targeted Palestinian refugees and Shia Lebanese civilians, with a death toll estimated between 2,500 to 3,000 people. Just like Hamas in Gaza, Israel says the war is with Hezbollah. But in both cases, civilians, healthcare workers, and journalists have been at the forefront of casualties. Activists and academics say Israel has breached several international laws. When pushed for comment, Israeli politicians and military officials say their targets are justified to strike Hezbollah and that civilians killed in these attacks are collateral damage. But are these tactics violating international law?
You don't have to be a cheerleader or proponent of these organizations, right, of Hamas or Hezbollah or whatever, to say that no, self-defense, again, is about repelling armed attacks that either have happened or are imminent, right? And doing so in a proportionate way. That means you can only attack military targets, right? You can't attack the civilian infrastructure associated with these organizations, which, as I've already said, have significant civilian components. So targeting, the political infrastructure, as Israel has been doing over the past day or so, targeting Hezbollah media operations because they advance the ideas associated with Hezbollah, all this kind of thing, that is, very, very likely to be a violation of the law.
Some say the tactic of targeting civilians promotes internal political divisions within the country.
Hezbollah has used some forms of psychological warfare. Mainly, it's speeches, and it is recon drones, which they've sent all the way to Haifa. Other than fear and other than these motives, as I said, they're trying to turn society against Hezbollah by always giving Hezbollah the responsibility for what's happening, that they're the moral enemy that wouldn't be attacking Lebanon had Hezbollah not stored weapons between houses and under houses and missiles and kitchens. The psychological warfare campaign does go beyond instilling fear and insecurity in their opponents. Resistance is an ideology, and it is a form of life that one has to adopt when they're faced by an occupier and by an invader. So they could kill people, but they can never defeat the idea. Israel has been genociding Palestinians in Gaza under the same slogan of eradicating and defeating Hamas since the 7th of October of last year, and they still haven't done that yet. Keeping in mind that Hamas is less than a quarter of Hezbollah.
A year after Israel set out to eliminate Hamas following the resistance group's October 7th Al-Aqsa flood, Hamas has not yet been eradicated. The armed conflict location and event data reports that 8,500 Hamas fighters have been killed since October 7th, compared to Israel's claim that 17,000 fighters have been killed. While Hezbollah continues to retaliate on Israeli soil and at the southern Lebanese border, where Israeli forces are attempting to invade Lebanon, Hezbollah's support is wavering. Lebanese support for the group has been declining in recent years. However, data collected from Arab Barometer from between February and April 2024 found that support for Hezbollah had increased. Despite this increased support, only 30% of Lebanon's population said they had a great deal of trust in Hezbollah. However, Lebanese support for Hamas is much more widespread across Lebanon, with 79% of the Lebanese population expressing a positive opinion of the resistance group. Some say resistance is essential to defend against Israel's brutality and invasion.
We're bordering a settler colonial state that forced these movements to come to life. Because we house these movements, which are our only way to prevent occupation, prevent wars, prevent attacks against us, we're not viewed the same. Our lives don't matter as much. We're also viewed as one entity rather than individuals. And our reaction to massacres against civilians are never justified in the West as acts of self-defense, but they're always aggression, they're always terrorism.
A year ago, when protests were happening around the world, one of the things that were said in the protests is that if we don't stop it in Gaza, it will extend. A year later, it's happening. As long as there is someone resisting or someone actually doing a concrete action against Israel, then Israel will go and will try to extend its tyranny and its terrorism towards it. And that's what's been happening in Lebanon, that's what's been happening in Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and this is, it's unlimited.
Savannah Craig, Local 514, Montreal.